Hello everyone, it's McCready Musings here, and welcome back to the history of Magic the Gathering told through a card from every set. This is part 20, and we'll be discussing a series of spine-chilling murders that occurred at Karlov Manor, the rough and tumble adventures of the Outlaws of Thunder Junction, the blissful blessed bliss of Bloomburrow, followed up by the horrifying, horrible horror of Duskmourn. And then, finally, we'll be examining Magic's exciting new foundations. Just a reminder that this series only covers standard legal sets, so I won't be talking about Modern Horizons 3 here. I'm sure that I'll make another video to discuss the Modern Horizons sets and Tales from Middle-earth at some point in the future though. I've got lots of thoughts about the sets from 2024, but I won't spoil them here in the introduction. Let's sweep right in and get going. On the 19th of February 2024, murders at Karlov Manor crept its way conspicuously away from the scene of the crime and into local game stores. Just a quick side note before we go any further, I've removed the number I used to display at the top of the screen to show how many cards are in a set. Why? Well, it's not really possible anymore to provide a useful figure there. Sets used to just contain X number of cards. Now they contain X cards, plus some cards from a list, plus some special guest cards, plus a whole slew of new straight-to-commander cards. I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, it's just the way Magic is now. Displaying a single number on the top of the screen no longer really feels like it's providing useful info. For the record, I won't be counting cards from a supplemental Commander decks as eligible for this series. When I continue my History of Commander series, I'll look at them there. Anyway, murders at Karlov Manor. It's no mystery that this set didn't exactly sell very well. On his blog, head designer Mark Rosewater stated that it performed below expectations, and alluded to the fact that it was the worst performing set in many years. You've all probably seen the Tolarian Community College video, which goes into quite a few reasons why this set didn't live up to expectations. A common complaint is that the set just didn't really feel like Ravnica. It was very tropey. Something we'll be coming back to a lot in our discussions of the sets from 2024. And everyone was just a detective now for some reason. Kellen, Oko's kid, is a detective now, this Rakdos demon is a detective, this gargoyle is a detective, and this ghost is making Columbo references. It just kind of felt like there was this pulpy layer of whodunitness plastered over Ravnica without any real rhyme or reason. Ravnica is one of Magic's most beloved and well-developed worlds. Murders at Karlov Manor just made it feel shallower, rather than enhancing or deepening our understanding of the plane. Initially, the set wasn't even intended to occur on Ravnica. In a podcast about the design of Karlov Manor, Rosewater states,
"The original plan, by the way, was we're going to do a brand new world, a murder mystery world, a world that optimized murder mysteries, where people were dying left and right and they were always solving crimes." There's certain things that the world needed. One is that it needed to have some structure to it. Like part of the genre of murder mysteries is that there's a society, usually there's a city, and there's law enforcement, that there's structure there, that, and so they were looking to make sort of the new world have a city to it, and have law enforcement. And one of the things that kept coming up is it's space we had played in before, in Ravnica, and the other big city is we made a city in New Capenna.
So the choices were between Ravnica, New Capenna, and a whole new world. Why was Ravnica ultimately chosen?
So some people ask, by the way, New Capenna, the 20s is a time of noir. A lot of murder mysteries are done in noir. Why not do the murder mystery of Capenna? The reason we didn't do that, and we didn't talk about it, was that kind of the nature of how we made New Capenna was that the law was very inefficient. And it was there, I guess, but it didn't have the strength that we needed. Like, in the end, when the law arrests you, they arrest you. And New Capenna was all about, it was mobster world where people were dying left and right. It didn't have the right vibe we needed. There's a little too many people dying, and not enough sort of law enforcement in a way that we needed. But Ravnica had the city, had structure, and the Boros were the law. There was a law structure, and there was, and the Azorius ran the legal system. Like, there was a system set up. And what happened basically was the world that they were building just sort of kept feeling like Ravnica, and we finally said to ourselves, why are we reinventing the wheel? If we need a city place with law, like Ravnica is that, why not just be Ravnica?
There were definitely some issues finding a setting for this set. The designers didn't want to make a new world because it felt like they were retreading old ground. They didn't want to use New Capenna because the plane felt too corrupt to tell a story about crime with consequences. That left Ravnica. and while the plane seemed perfect on paper, upon release, many players felt like the set was occurring in some strange new murder mystery world, and not the Ravnica they recognised. Anyway, that's enough talking about murder mystery tropes and set sales, let's look at some cards. We'll be representing Karlov Manor not with a detective, but with a serial killer. Vein Ripper, a card with a name that just makes me viscerally uncomfortable. Of course, that's not why I've picked this violent vampire to represent the set. I've picked this card because of the impact it had on the Pioneer format. In early 2024, Rakdos Vampires was the deck to watch. Seth Manfield won Pro Tour Murders at Karlov Manor with the deck, and there was another copy of the deck piloted by Sam Pardee, also placing in the top 8. Vein Ripper was a big reason for the success of the deck. Usually, it's difficult for cards like Vein Ripper to do well in contemporary constructed Magic. As a 6-mana 6/5 with flying, a ward ability that makes it incredibly obnoxious to target, and a powerful effect that deals 2 damage to an opponent, recovers 2 life for its controller whenever a creature dies, Vein Ripper is certainly very strong. Unfortunately, 6 mana makes the card too expensive to be hardcast, and it's not on the same level as something like a Traxagrand Unifier or Gristlebrand, so it's not really a great reanimation target. Fortunately for Vein Ripper though, it is a vampire, meaning that it can be cheated into play by Soaring Imperious Bloodlord. This printing of Soaring came out in Core Set 2020. It's a 3-mana planeswalker with a -3 ability that lets it bring any vampire creature from the hand straight into play. A turn-free Vein Ripper is incredibly difficult to deal with, and it was capable of ripping apart games just like it ripped apart Veins. On the 26th of August, Soaring Imperious Bloodlord was banned in Pioneer. Vein Ripper survived, largely because, without Soaring to enable it, it just wasn't a problematic card, and if Soaring was left unbanned, it would have the potential to continue causing problems in the future. The ban announcement stated, "When considering which part of a 2-card combo to act on, one consideration we make is how likely one of the 2 cards is to cause an issue with other cards in the environment, or with potential cards that may exist one day. Paying a card's printed mana cost is generally a safe and fair strategy, whilst being able to discount a card by several mana is sometimes too strong. Banning Vein Ripper would have temporarily brought Rakdos Vampires in line, but it would only be a matter of time before another powerful vampire would come along for Soaring to cheat into play on turn 3. Here's another reminder that Magic's mana system is very important, and cheating around it is a surefire way to make a busted deck." Outlaws of Thunder Junction rode into town with a bandolier strapped over its shoulder and a 6-shooter holstered to its hip on the 19th of April 2024. Yes, here it is, the long-awaited Wild West set. OTJ had all of the trappings of a western. Showdowns at high noon, prospecting for ore in them there hills, and more characters in cowboy hats than you could shake a horseshoe-coated detonator at. Like Karlov Manor, Thunder Junction was a very tropey set. It had all the beats you'd expect from a western, but it just didn't really feel hugely deep or compelling. Some have described it like they're putting Fortnite cowboy skins over Magic's cast, and yeah, I can see that as a criticism. One of the things that's always made Magic stand out is its fantastic world building. Innistrad is a world inspired by Gothic horror, but it puts its own spin on its source material. Delver of Secrets is inspired by The Fly, but it takes the story in its own bizarre, eldritch direction. The same with Kaldheim in Norse mythology, or Kamigawa and its Shinto and cyberpunk inspirations. Comparatively, Thunder Junction just feels a little bit shallow. Now, I don't think this is the fault of any of the incredibly hard-working creatives and designers working at Wizards of the Coast. Making fully realised fantasy worlds is incredibly difficult. I expect the issue lies with Magic's release schedule, which has ramped up massively. Back when we had blocks, we'd typically stay on a given plane for a whole year, giving Magic's designers ample time to lovingly sculpt their worlds. Nowadays, though, we hurtle from plane to plane every handful of months, and it's got to be tricky to keep building world after world at that sort of frantic pace. Let's stop wandering the multiverse now and return to Thunder Junction. Mechanically, the set cares about several things. Deserts matter, and we got a cycle of dual-coloured ones that ping opponents as they enter play. We got some mounts, creatures that can be saddled, which works a bit like crewing a vehicle in order to unlock bonus abilities. We got modal spree cards that have a series of effects, some or all of which the caster can pay for. Cards can be plotted from a hand to be cast on a later turn, and we can commit crimes, which was a spicy way of flavouring cards that care about targeting opponents or their stuff. But of course, the set's called Outlaws of Thunder Junction, so let's talk about its titular mechanic, Outlaws. I can confirm the card I'll be using to represent this set cares about Outlaws, which yes, that does mean it's not Vaultborn Tyrant or Slickshot Show-Off. Don't worry though, I'll be talking about the Show-Off later on, so let's just put a pin in that card for the moment. Calling cards Outlaws is a way of batching certain creature types together. Warlocks, assassins, rogues, mercenaries, and pirates are all outlaws. You can remember these creature types with the acronym WARM-P. Credit to the Lords of Limited podcast who came up with that one. Many cards in the set care about you controlling a bunch of outlaws. Hellspur Brute has affinity for them and can be cast very cheaply if you have a lot of outlaws in play. Brackish Crew drains your opponent whenever one of your outlaws dies, and Vile Smasher is a pinger that damages an opponent whenever an outlaw enters play. The card which we'll be using to represent Thunder Junction brings together the two strands we've been talking about. It's a card that's very tropey and one that cares about outlaws. Shoot the Sheriff. For 1 and a black, Shoot the Sheriff destroys target non-outlaw creature. It's a Doomblade variant. Doomblade was first printed in Magic 2010. Itself a variant of the card Terror that was from Alpha. Doomblade destroys any target non-black creature. Doomblade's sort of the measuring stick against which most 2-mana black removal spells are measured. They'll be conditional in some way, for example, Go for the Throat can't destroy artifact creatures, Cast Down can't destroy legendary creatures, etc. We've recently been getting rather a lot of Doomblade variants, like Shoot the Sheriff here, including the most powerful iteration to date, Infernal Grasp, that was printed in Innistrad Midnight Hunt. Unlike every other Doomblade imitator, Infernal Grasp is completely unconditional, requiring a payment of life to be made instead. The card Fell from Bloomburrow is also unconditional, but it can only be cast at sorcery speed. So, Shoot the Sheriff continues this tradition of recent Doomblade impersonators, along with the tradition of contemporary Magic being full of loud genre homages. Shoot the Sheriff's artwork, perhaps unsurprisingly, depicts someone shooting a sheriff with the flavour text, "Now where's that deputy?" This is an incredibly overt pop culture reference to the 1973 Bob Marley song, "I Shot the Sheriff." Magic's always contained pop culture references, but usually they're a bit less on the nose than this one. I'll leave it to your personal taste though, whether you find this card funny or kinda cringe. Bloomburrow blossomed out on the 2nd of August 2024. I'll be honest and lay out my own biases here. Bloomburrow was easily my favourite set of the year, and I think it goes to show how much aesthetics matter. I've laid out how I feel that Karlov Manor and Thunder Junction were both a bit tropey and on the nose for my taste. Spoiler warning, I feel the same way about Duskmourn as well. While yes, Bloomburrow was cribbing a bit from Redwall, the set still felt distinct, refreshing and unique. Its limited format was very streamlined and simple, yes, but that's by no means a bad thing. In fact, I actually feel like there's maybe a bit more to Bloomburrow than people give it credit for. Okay, so the set has a typal theme, with a different adorable animal faction for every 2-colour combination. Birds are in white and blue, rats are in blue and black, lizards are in red and black, raccoons are in red and green, rabbits are in green and white, bats are in white and black, otters are in blue and red, squirrels are in black and green, mice are in red and white, and frogs are in green and blue. We've talked before about how some typal sets, well, Ixalan, didn't quite land, because they didn't include enough incentives to cross over into other types. Well, Bloomburrow found a solution to this problem that I honestly think is quite elegant. Many typal sets include cards that benefit their creature type. Bloomburrow had a small number of these, but mostly had expressed the identity of the different creature types by tying them to mechanics. Lizards get stronger if they're played after an opponent has lost life, otters are a spellslinger deck, and frogs want you to bounce creatures back into the hand. Quick side note, whoever decided they should mechanically tie frogs to bouncing cards deserves a raise. That's a slice of game design that's as beautifully artful as it is completely cheesy. Many of these themes weave together, allowing cards of one creature type to help out with the strategies encouraged by another. I'll demonstrate this with the card that I'm using to represent this set, Emberheart Challenger. So, Emberheart Challenger is a mouse. It's a 2/2 for 2 with haste and prowess. It also has Valiant. Valiant is the signature mechanic of the mice in Bloomburrow. Valiant means that the first time the card is targeted by a spell or ability from its controller in a given turn, its effect activates and you get a bonus. In the case of Emberheart Challenger, when you target it, you exile the top card of your deck and you can play it until the end of your turn. Now, Emberheart Challenger is a mouse with the signature mouse mechanic. So yeah, obviously you can play it in the mouse deck. But it also serves a useful function for every single one of the other archetypes that exist in red. The otter theme is Spellslinger, so a prowess card like this would absolutely work in an otter deck. Raccoons are based around the ability Expend, which wants you to spend lots of mana during your turn. The extra card draw which Emberheart Challenger provides means that it can help you dig through your deck for more cards to cast in order to enable Expend. Given that lizards care about making the opponent lose life, they have a very aggro-oriented playstyle, and so a 2/2 for 2 with haste would absolutely fit into one of their decks. There's even a cycle of cards, the Valley Callers, that buff every creature type that's in their colour. You can only run squirrels, or you can throw some of the other creature types that are in black into your deck as well, and Valley Rockcaller's effect will get stronger either way. Returning to Emberheart Challenger for a while, I picked this card both to illustrate the cross-pollination of themes in Bloomburrow, but also because of its role in Gruul prowess decks that are pretty powerful in Standard at the minute. But let's pop Emberheart Challenger under the same pin that we put Slickshot Show Off under. Just for a moment more, we'll discuss the deck soon. Bloomburrow was just a great set. Its limited format may not have had the complexity of sets like Duskmourn or Modern Horizons 3, but I think there's more to it than meets the eye. I didn't even get into discussing the talent cards and how you can build your decks around those. Simple and clean isn't always bad, and Bloomburrow more than deserves its place as my favourite set of 2024. Duskmourn, House of Horror, burst writhing and screaming into the material plane on the 27th of September 2024. I'll be honest, contemporary horror isn't really my jam. I also felt that some of the pop culture references Duskmourn made to stuff like Gremlins, Chucky and Ghostbusters were a little on the nose, but nevertheless, I'll put my opinion on this to the side, because I know this is a set that did speak to many people, who really do love this spooky old haunted house plane. It helps that the set's limited format was widely regarded as being pretty awesome. In Duskmourn, building a synergistic deck really mattered. It wasn't enough just to grab a pile of powerful cards. There were lots of graveyard-focused archetypes that ended up being pretty fun to play, and rooms, the set's marquee mechanic, basically split enchantments with 2 effects that you can pay for at separate times, worked out pretty well in practice. The card we'll be choosing to represent Duskmourn was pretty terrible for limited, but more than pulled its weight in constructed. It synergizes with those 2 cards we pinned earlier, Slickshot Shelf and Emberheart Challenger. Can you guess what it is? I have no way of hearing you, so I don't know if you guessed right or wrong, but the card is Leyline of Resonance. Leyline effects have been part of Magic the Gathering since Guild Pact in 2006. A Leyline is a 4 mana value enchantment, or well, in one instance a 4 mana value piece of equipment, that can be played for free as a pre-game action if it's in your opening hand. We got 1 Leyline of each colour in Duskmourn: Mutation, Transformation, Void, Hope and Resonance. Void is a reprint, and most of the other Leylines ended up being pretty forgettable cards. But the last, Resonance, ended up being so powerful that it was banned in Magic the Gathering Arena Best of 1 games and nerfed for Alchemy. So, Leyline of Resonance allows you to copy an instant or sorcery spell which you cast that targets a single creature that you control. Now, Gruul Prowess was a deck in Standard before this Leyline came along, but the printing of the Leyline gave it a massive power boost. The aim of the deck is to use combat tricks like Monstrous Rage, Turn Inside Out and Overprotect, to target Prowess cards or cards with functionally very similar abilities, like Emberheart Challenger, Slickshot Show Off, Monastery Swiftspear and Heartfire Hero. These decks could finish off opponents very quickly. Let me play this scenario out to demonstrate how. So, you have a Slickshot Show Off out and the Leyline in play. You target your Show Off with a Turn Inside Out, which gets copied by the Leyline. It has 1 power already, then it gets +2/+0 from its effect, and then +3/+0 twice from the 2 copies of Turn Inside Out, giving it a total of 9 power. If you follow it up by casting Monstrous Rage, then the shelf will get another +2/+0 from its effect, then +1/+0 from the Monstrous Roll token created by Monstrous Rage, and +2/+0 twice from the 2 copies of Monstrous Rage. That's a total of 16 power. And this is not a combination that's difficult to put together. Many of the pieces here could be swapped out for other cards, and you can get this off the ground really early in the game. In standard play at your local game store, the counter is easy to put together. For game 2, you just sideboard in some enchantment hate to deal with the Leylines, and some board wipes to sweep up all of the low-cost Prowess creatures. On Arena though, many standard games are played in best of 1, with no opportunity to make any substitutions to the cards in your list. If you don't have the answers to this super fast game plan in your deck by default, then you need to prepare to lose more than your fair share of games. Since the deck could easily be dealt with by sideboarding, but was hard to answer without it, the Leyline got banned, bringing the deck in line. This is a slightly unusual way to handle banning, but I can definitely see the logic here. It's not the first slightly unique MTG Arena banning that's happened. I made a whole video about the Book of Exalted Deeds ban a while ago, and I suspect it won't be the last. Just as I imagine this 2024 excursion won't be our last trip to Duskmourn. What's the most epic storyline in Magic? Some might say it's the world-spanning, Star Trek-inspired Weatherlight saga. Others would vote for the fratricidal chaos of the Brothers' War, or Elspeth's tragic tale in Feroth block. For my money though, it's the fraught story of Wizards of the Coast's on-again, off-again relationship with core sets. Foundations, like Magic Origins, Core Set 2019, and Adventures in the Forgotten Realms before it, marks yet another attempt to reinvent the core set. Released on the 15th November 2024, Foundations does offer a genuinely new take on what a core set can be, and a more substantive redesign of the concept than we've ever seen before. Foundations contains 133 brand new cards, along with 148 reprints. That's not counting the reprints that also appear in the Foundations Beginner Box and the Foundations Starter Collection though. Those are 2 different products that were released alongside Foundations, although they contain reprints that can't be opened in Foundation packs, like Maze's End, the Ashino Pyromancer, and Darksteel Colossus. They're still marked with a Foundation set symbol and are considered standard legal. Apart from Soul Ring, Command Tower and Arcane Signet, which are in the Starter Collection but have a different set symbol. Oh, And there's also Foundation's Jumpstart, which contains several new mechanically unique legendary creature cards of anime artwork. Do you see why I stopped writing the number of cards included in each set now? Anyway, yes, 133 new cards, 148 reprints. Borrowing an idea from a lot of digital card games like Hearthstone and Shadowverse, Foundations is a sort of base set, seeded with lots of evergreen archetypes and essential cards that are good for the health of Standard. Foundations is designed to not follow the same rotation rules as other sets. We've been told that Foundations will remain in print and remain in Standard until 2029. Every colour pair in Foundations has a draft archetype based on its most common strategy. White and green care about +1/+1 counters, red and blue is Spellslinger, and red and white is aggro, etc. This means that the game's designers won't need to print functional but unexciting cards to support these archetypes into other sets, where they wouldn't necessarily fit. The set also contains a lot of typal support. Krenko's here if you want to build a goblin deck, and there's Lafrel here for any elf aficionados. And, if you can get your hands on that beginner's box, you'll find a Death Baron to help out with a zombie deck. Someone at F&M always wants to play a standard deck based around the big creature types like elves and goblins, so filling Foundations with cards that enable this is a pretty savvy move as far as I'm concerned. Speaking of memey standard decks, Magic has a proud tradition of printing what Magic R&D call relentless cards, but which I call collect me cards. When I say collect me cards, I mean cards that incentivize you to collect and play with as many copies of them as possible in your deck. These cards break the standard deck building limitations of the game by allowing any number of them to be included in your deck. The first of these was Relentless Rats. It was printed in 2004 in 5th Dawn. Relentless Rats is a 3-mana 2/2 rat that gets +1/+1 for every other creature on the battlefield named Relentless Rats. Since then, we've had a lot of variants of this effect. Cards like 7 Dwarves in Eldraine that bend the deck building rules by allowing, well, up to 7 of them into your deck. Cards like Persistent Petitioners that want you to collect a whole bunch of them, but then win through milling rather than through combat damage. And there have even been some sorcery-based variants of these Collect Me cards, namely Dragon's Approach and Slime Against Humanity. All these cards provide a varied and fun play experience, even if they're not super competitively viable. Load up your deck with some lands, a bunch of copies of these cards and some tools to support them, and you're off to the races. Unfortunately, the fact that these cards incentivise buying copies of them in bulk makes them popular purchases, and this jacks up their price tag a bit. It can be a bit expensive putting one of these decks together, but it's definitely worth trying out at least once. You probably have more common wild cards than you could ever need on MTG Arena though, so it makes a good place to try these decks out. Foundations give us a brand new Collect Me card in the form of Heir Apparent. Heir Apparent is a 2-mana 2/2, meaning it's both a bear and a hare. When Heir Apparent enters play, for every other Heir Apparent you control, you make a 1/1 rabbit creature token. Compared to Relentless Rats, Heir Apparent won't have stats that are quite as high, but the card's cheaper and enables you to flood the board much more quickly. Other than the hares and some planes, it's up to you how you want to fill out the rest of your deck. Maybe your Hare Heir is also friends with a Warren War Leader or a Valley Quest Caller. If you're building around this card for Commander, Banner of Kinship can give all of your rabbits the firepower they need to close out the game. So, Heir Apparent is the card I'm representing Foundations with. I have a sort of mental checklist of recurring Magic things that I want to cover in this series. These Collect Me cards have been on there for a while now, and I'm glad I finally got to cross them off. Now then, let's get to our conclusion. It's the end of today's episode, and you know what that means. It's poll time! I've run 2 polls that I haven't talked about the results of yet, so that means you get twice the poly goodness to look forward to. At the end of episode 19, I asked you guys to tell me how you felt about the Phyrexian arc that concluded in 2023. 111 people responded. It's almost a tie at the top, with 33% of people saying that they liked it, and 32% saying that they didn't care. 19% of people disliked it, and then 8% of people loved it, and 8% of people hated it. If we combine the different sets of positive and negative answers together, then 41% of you guys enjoyed the storyline, 32% were ambivalent, and 27% didn't like it. That's a reasonably solid win for people liking this particular arc. Good job, Volforces. Personally, I felt like the Phyrexian arc went a bit quickly. I feel like we should have had another set dedicated to the big war alongside March of the Machines, rather than just dumping us straight to the aftermath. But yeah, I'm kinda glad that positive feelings won out here. Next, after my unset video, I asked you all if you wanted to see more unsets in the future. I was honestly a bit surprised by the results of this one. 54% of you said yes, 27% of you said no, and 19% of you were unsure. Unfinity got a really negative response, but it seemed like this didn't sour the community on unsets generally. Folks are willing to view the set as a small blip and not a total disaster. At least from a small sample of the MTG community that I was able to survey here, thanks to the 79 of you who voted. For next time, I'll be interested to hear how you guys feel about Universes Beyond. That poll will be coming up right after this video, so please let me know. Anyway, that's the end of poll time, so let's wrap this up. Like I've repeated several times throughout this video, 2024 was a bit tropey. The worlds were a bit larger than life and lent a lot more on pop culture references than normal. Having said that though, we still got some great limited environments. I will always stan Bloomburrow, and even though I didn't like Duskmourn's aesthetic, or its general vibe, even I have to admit that it was a great set to draft. 2025 is going to be an interesting year. I won't give away my thoughts on how I feel about Spider-Man and Cloud Strife entering Standard just yet, wouldn't want to bias the poll. Beyond that though, we're getting Magic's take on Mario Kart in Aether Drift, a return to Tarkir, and then a sci-fi set with Edge of Eternities. Personally, I'm a big sci-fi guy, so I'm really looking forward to that last one. I'll take a breath and enjoy that I'm all up to date, and once again this series covers all of the standard legal Magic sets that have been released from 1993 until today. Well, for a few more days at least. Aether Drift is fast approaching. I'll try to make some more videos this year. In fact, I'm going to experiment with making some content about Aether Drift, so you can check that out when it's up. In the meantime, if you want more from me, I write a fortnightly column for EDH Rec entitled Under the Radar, where I discuss underplayed commanders and how you can brew decks around them. I'll link that down in the description. It's not Magic related, but I also sometimes write stuff for Super Jump magazine about video games. There'll be a link to that in the description too. With that said, this is McCready Musings, signing off.